Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing HFY stories. Hit the bell icon to get notified about our latest uploads. In the cold, desolate expanse of the alien world, Mratza, the skilled huntress of the Xyrix race, stood tall among the towering alien vegetation, her elongated limbs effortlessly blending into the dark, murky forest. Her eyes, glowing faintly amber, scanned the terrain for the elusive prey she had been tracking for days. She was a master of stealth and speed, feared across galaxies for her ability to track and kill even the most formidable creatures. But today her quarry was not some beast, it was a human. For weeks, the Xyrix Empire had been hunting humans, seeing them as primitive, weak beings unworthy of their place in the cosmos. The Xyrix had known about humanity's presence in the galaxy for some time, but they had underestimated the human spirit. That was a mistake Mratza would rectify. She would prove the superiority of her species once and for all by capturing a human, perhaps even bringing one back to her superiors as proof of their strength. Her task was simple: locate the human, eliminate any threats, and return with her trophy. As a huntress, Mratza knew there was no challenge too great for her. She had followed the human for hours, watching him struggle to navigate the alien terrain. The human, a man named Jason Clark, was disoriented but determined. His ship had crash-landed on this alien world, and he had been alone ever since. The huntress admired his persistence as he crafted makeshift tools from the wreckage of his spacecraft. She had watched him survive against the odds, his human ingenuity enabling him to adapt to the planet's dangerous wildlife. Mratza had not been the first Xyrix to engage with humanity. Several Xyrix vessels had been destroyed after underestimating humanity's capacity for defense. Jason Clark, however, was different. He wasn't just surviving, he was learning, evolving. He had found a way to communicate with the local fauna, using their natural instincts to his advantage. He had already set up a series of traps, expertly camouflaged in the dense foliage. But none of this would matter to Mratza. She had been trained for this moment. She would take him down swiftly without hesitation. Her hand hovered near the vibroblade at her side. This weapon, forged from a rare alien metal, could slice through the toughest armor with ease. She dropped down from her perch, landing silently behind him. Her breathing steady, she approached her prey. He had no idea she was there. Her eyes gleamed with the thrill of the hunt. One wrong move, and the human would fall to her superior speed and strength. She moved closer just as Jason heard something rustling in the bushes. Jason spun around, his hand instinctively reaching for the blaster at his side. But it was too late. Mratza's gloved hand shot out, snatching the weapon from his grasp. She twisted his arm with ease, pushing him to the ground with a single, fluid motion. Jason groaned, trying to push himself up, but his body betrayed him. He was weak, exhausted, and his survival instincts told him to flee, but there was nowhere to run. He had been too focused on surviving the alien landscape to notice the deadly huntress who had been tailing him for days. Mratza crouched down beside him, her cold, amber eyes staring into his. For a moment, Jason thought he saw something in her gaze, a flicker of doubt, perhaps. But it was gone before he could be sure. "You are nothing," Mratza hissed, her voice as cold as the alien night. "A weak, pathetic creature. I should have killed you days ago." Jason winced, his ribs aching as he slowly turned his head to meet her gaze. He didn't speak, he had no words. Instead, he focused on the feeling that had been growing inside him since his crash, the realization that he was not alone. He had been listening to the whispers of the alien creatures in the forest, a strange connection forming between him and the world around him. He wasn't entirely sure what it was, but he felt it deep within his bones. Mratza was about to strike the killing blow when she froze. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger but in curiosity. Jason's breathing had slowed and his body had gone still. It was as though he was no longer afraid. He wasn't begging for mercy. He wasn't scrambling to save himself. Instead, he was offering her something, a sense of calm. For a split second, Mratza felt her own pulse quicken. Something was wrong. Her heart, a cold alien thing, thudded against her chest. She was the predator, the superior species. She should have been reveling in this moment, savoring the kill. Yet, there was a strange discomfort building within her. She had never encountered this before. Jason's gaze softened, and he spoke, his voice calm but filled with sincerity. "You don't have to do this." Mratza blinked, her blade hovering just above his throat. The words felt strange, alien. The concept was even more so. His words were not of defiance, not of pleading. They were an offer, a suggestion even. "I don't have to?" Mratza repeated, her voice betraying a flicker of confusion. She had hunted countless species, crushed the lives of beings stronger than him without a second thought. But this felt different. Jason didn't respond immediately. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to breathe deeply, his chest rising and falling slowly. It wasn't the human fear of death he had expected. It wasn't even the terror of being hunted by an alien race. No, this was something different, something that made Mratza pause, a twinge of uncertainty gripping her. For the first time in her life, Mratza, the feared huntress of the Zyrex, was questioning her purpose. Mratza hovered above Jason, her vibroblade poised to strike, yet something within her hesitated. She had slaughtered countless beings with ease, each one of them helpless against her might. Yet this human, this fragile, weak creature, was different. He did not plead for his life or react with terror. Instead, he offered her something unfamiliar: peace. The sheer audacity of his calmness unnerved her. Jason had closed his eyes, his breathing steady and slow. He was not waiting for her to kill him. He was waiting for her to see something he had discovered on this strange alien world. His body, battered and bruised from days of survival in the hostile environment, was now a vessel of quiet resilience. Despite everything, he had learned to listen, to feel, something beyond the brutality of the world he was trapped in. "You don't have to do this," Jason repeated, his voice gentle but unwavering. The words echoed in the silence of the forest, and Mratza's mind raced, struggling to comprehend them. She had been trained to see the universe in simple terms: predator and prey, strength and weakness. Yet, before her, stood a human who defied those concepts, offering no resistance but instead offering something intangible. Mratza's mind swirled with confusion, but her instincts, honed by years of training, screamed at her to end this quickly. He was nothing. A fragile human. She had to kill him, prove her superiority. That's what the Zyrex expected of her. That's what she expected of herself. But still she hesitated. For the first time she noticed the subtle signs of exhaustion on Jason's face, the bruises beneath his eyes, the stiffness in his posture, the deep cuts on his hands. He had been through hell, yet there was no fear in his gaze, no desperation to survive at any cost. It was as if he had made peace with his fate, but not in a way she understood. Jason slowly opened his eyes, meeting her gaze again. "You don't have to be a killer," he said, this time with a softness that was almost foreign to Mratza. "You can choose something else. Something better." Her mind raced. His words were an assault on everything she had been taught. A Zyrex huntress was not supposed to offer mercy. She was supposed to take the lives of those beneath her without a second thought. Yet here was a human offering no resistance, only understanding. It made no sense. "You speak of mercy, human," Mratza said, her voice sharp, a mixture of confusion and anger. "Do you not know what I am? What I am capable of? I am a huntress. I was born to kill. I will show no mercy to you." Jason's lips quirked up in a faint, sad smile. "I don't want mercy," he said quietly. "I want you to see that there's another way. A way that doesn't involve violence. I want you to understand that not everything in this world is about taking or conquering. Sometimes it's about giving." Mratza blinked, her hand still gripping her weapon. She had killed beings far stronger than this human, but somehow the certainty in his voice rattled her. How could he speak of such concepts without fear, without the desperation of a creature cornered? Jason slowly raised his hands in a gesture of peace. "I'm not your enemy. I'm just trying to survive." A ripple of something unfamiliar stirred in Mratza's chest. She had never seen a prey species act in such a way, so calm, so open. It didn't make sense. It went against every instinct, every fiber of her being that had been trained to see weakness and crush it. She had been taught that the weak should perish and that survival was a simple equation. Strength equals life, weakness equals death. But Jason wasn't weak. He was human, yes, fragile by her standards, but there was something in his manner, something in the way he carried himself that made her pause. Mratza's mind raced. The Zyrex would not understand this hesitation. She could already hear the echoes of the orders that would come if she returned to them empty-handed. She would be seen as weak, unfit to lead. She had been chosen for this hunt because of her skill, her strength. To show mercy to a human was not only foolish, it was unacceptable. And yet, the doubt in her mind gnawed at her. Her gaze shifted from the vibroblade in her hand to Jason's face, and for the first time she saw something other than the human's exhaustion. There was a quiet strength in him, a strength she had never seen in her prey before. His calmness wasn't a plea, it was a challenge. Jason took a small, cautious step forward. Mratza tensed, instinctively preparing to strike. But he didn't raise a weapon. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, gleaming object, a fragment of metal from his ship. He held it out to her, palm up, as though offering it to her. "I don't know if you can understand," he said softly, "but this is what we humans do. We don't conquer. We adapt. We create. We build. I didn't give up on surviving out here because I had nothing left to fight for. I kept going because I believed there was something more to life than just surviving." Mratza's eyes narrowed at the object. It was just a piece of scrap, a remnant of his wrecked ship. What significance did it hold? Jason's words echoed in her mind. "We believe that the key to survival is not in taking, but in sharing." Mratza looked at him in disbelief. Sharing? She had never heard such nonsense. But something deep within her stirred. She had lived her entire life believing that power came from domination. That only by defeating others could one claim victory. But this human, this weak, fragile human, was offering something different. Compassion. It was as though a door was opening inside her, and she didn't know how to shut it again. Jason took another step closer. His voice was soft, but there was an unshakable certainty in his words. "We're not so different. You and I. You think you're the only one who's ever had to fight for survival. But I promise you, Mratza, we all have something to fight for. Something worth saving." Mratza felt a flicker of something deep within her, something she had never felt before. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something else. She didn't know what to call it, but it unsettled her. She had never felt vulnerable. Never had she been made to question the righteousness of her cause. She raised her vibroblade slightly, eyeing Jason closely. Her mind screamed at her to kill him. She was the predator. She was the hunter. She had the power. But the words of the human, the calmness in his gaze, made her hesitate once again. For the first time in her life, Mratza didn't know what to do. Mratza stood there, her hand trembling slightly as she gripped the vibroblade. She had fought and killed so many before. The thrill of the hunt, the rush of power, it had been everything. But this moment, this strange confrontation with a human who didn't run, didn't scream, didn't beg for his life, it was disorienting. Jason's offer, his words, had planted a seed of doubt, one that was slowly unmooring the very foundation of her beliefs. Jason stood still, his eyes soft but unwavering, his hands open in that peaceful gesture. He wasn't trying to fight her, wasn't trying to escape. Instead, he was offering something entirely foreign to her, a chance to rethink, to pause, to choose something other than destruction. And the strangest part was that he had no weapon, no defense. He was entirely at her mercy. Yet, it was Mratza who was starting to feel the pressure of his unspoken challenge. She clenched her jaw, her mind desperately trying to reconcile the conflict inside her. Every instinct told her to strike. End this now, show your strength, prove your superiority. That's what she had been raised to do. But the words of the human, the calmness of his presence, echoed in her mind. Jason, sensing her struggle, took another step forward. "You're not just a predator, Mratza," he said softly, his voice like a tether pulling her from the edge of certainty into uncharted waters. "You're more than that. You don't have to live your life in the shadows of violence." Her heart, a cold and calculating thing, skipped a beat. There was no fear in his words, no fear in his eyes. He wasn't trying to manipulate her, and yet, somehow he had gotten under her skin. "You don't know me," Mratza snapped, her voice growing harsh, the edge of anger returning to her tone. "You don't know what it's like to be the apex. The hunter. The one who rules." Jason's gaze remained steady, but there was no hint of judgment, only understanding. "I know what it's like to feel like there's nothing else. I've been in your position before." He gestured vaguely to the surroundings, the alien jungle, the wreckage of his ship, the isolation. "But I learned something. Power isn't about ruling. It's about connecting." Mratza shook her head, trying to shake off the growing unease. "You are weak. Your words are meaningless." Jason didn't flinch, his expression never wavering. "Maybe. But I think you're starting to realize that it's the strongest among us who are willing to open themselves to something other than strength. Strength isn't just what you can take, it's what you can give." Mratza's mind screamed at her to stop listening, to silence his voice, to crush him. He was a human, nothing more. How could she be so affected by his words? How could she feel this doubt? But the more she thought about it, the more the unease grew. She had never questioned her purpose before. She had been raised with the knowledge that she was superior, that her place was at the top of the food chain. She had killed without mercy, hunted without regret. But now, this human, this creature she had so easily dismissed, was offering her something different. And the worst part was, it was appealing. "You say you don't need to kill, Mratza said, her voice tight with frustration. But you're the one in my power. I could take your life in an instant. I could prove that I am everything you could never be. Jason stepped closer still, his presence calm and steady. Maybe you could. But would it really prove anything? Would it make you feel better, knowing you crushed someone who didn't even fight back? Or would it just make you feel empty? For a long moment, Mratza didn't speak. She could feel the weight of his words pressing down on her, each one like a stone dropped into the deep well of her thoughts. His question cut through her like nothing else ever had. Could she continue down the path of endless violence, or was there something more? For the first time in her life, Mratza's certainty wavered. She couldn't deny the nagging feeling growing inside her. Something about Jason's calmness, his acceptance of his fate, was rattling her in a way no prey ever had. She had hunted beings stronger than him, beings who fought back with all their might, and yet here she was questioning herself because of a human who didn't fight at all. I don't need your pity, Mratza hissed, her hand tightening on the hilt of her blade. She could feel the vibration of the weapon beneath her fingertips, its edge sharp enough to tear through flesh and bone with a single strike. She could end this now, end the unease and return to what she knew. She could prove that she was still the apex predator. She could prove her strength. But another part of her, a part she had never acknowledged before, asked a question. Would that really make you stronger? Mratza stared down at the human, her breath quickening. She had never felt so conflicted. It was like she was looking into a mirror, but she didn't recognize the reflection. She had spent her entire life being told that strength meant dominance, that violence was the ultimate form of power. And yet, here was Jason standing before her, offering her something completely different. You think you can change me? Mratza asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She couldn't believe the words that were coming out of her mouth. They sounded so weak. Jason smiled, a small, sad smile that made Mratza's heart constrict. I'm not trying to change you, Mratza. I'm just showing you that you don't have to be who everyone else says you are. You can choose. You can choose to let go of all this hatred, all this violence, and find a better way. Mratza took a step back, her mind reeling. She had never felt so small, so vulnerable. And that terrified her. She had always been the one in control. She had always been the one who dictated the terms of the hunt. But now Jason's words had opened a door she wasn't sure she wanted to enter. What if she was wrong? What if there was another way? For the first time she felt the weight of her actions, the lives she had taken, the countless beings she had hunted and destroyed. And in that moment, a part of her wondered if there was a way to stop, to break free from the cycle of violence. Could she leave it all behind? Jason, still watching her with quiet understanding, gave her one last chance. You don't have to decide now. But think about it. You don't have to be alone anymore. You don't have to carry all this on your own. Mratza's fingers trembled around the hilt of her vibroblade, the weapon that had defined her for so long. The choice was hers. And for the first time in her life she didn't know what to do. The air between them grew thick with tension, hanging heavy like a storm waiting to break. Mratza stood motionless, her grip on the vibroblade trembling, her mind swirling with confusion and doubt. She had always prided herself on her certainty, her confidence in the role she played, the power she commanded. She had been a huntress since the moment she could walk, trained to eliminate, to conquer, to be the predator. It was the very essence of her existence. Yet here she was, on the brink of something she couldn't comprehend. Jason Clark, the human she had been sent to kill, was standing in front of her, offering her a vision of the universe she had never considered. One where power wasn't about domination but about connection. And somehow, for reasons she couldn't explain, it was resonating with her, burrowing into her soul, stirring up something she had long buried beneath layers of cold logic and instinct. Jason didn't move. He didn't press her, didn't beg. He just stood there, offering her peace, understanding, and a choice. It was a strange, almost alien thing for Mratza to face. She had never been given a choice before. Her path had always been clear. But now, for the first time in her life, she had to decide whether she would continue down the path of violence or choose something else, something unknown. What do you want from me, human? She finally spoke, her voice a low growl, thick with frustration. Why are you doing this? Why are you not fighting back? You could have easily killed me by now. Why offer me peace? Jason met her gaze, his expression calm, his posture open and unthreatening. I'm not trying to defeat you, Mratza. I'm not trying to kill you. I'm just offering you a chance to live differently. You've spent your whole life being a predator. But you don't have to be. You don't have to keep following orders that tell you to destroy what's different, what's weaker. You can choose a different path, one where you can build, not break. Her mind recoiled at the thought. Build? Not break? That was nonsense. The Xyrix Empire had built their entire civilization on strength, on the crushing of weaker species. The entire galaxy had been shaped by the harsh realities of survival, where only the strong survived. She had never known a world where the strong built rather than destroyed. It was too soft, too foreign to everything she had ever been taught. But Jason's words gnawed at her, digging into the cracks in her armor. He wasn't pleading. He wasn't trying to manipulate her. He was simply offering her a different way to exist, a different way to see the universe. And somehow it was appealing. I was born to hunt, Mratza said, her voice quiet, her grip tightening around the blade in her hand. Hunting is my purpose. My strength. Without it I am nothing. Jason shook his head, his gaze unwavering. That's not true. You've been taught that your strength comes from taking, from destroying. But strength, real strength, comes from growth, from connection. I can see it in you. You're more than just a weapon. You're capable of so much more than hunting. Mratza stared at him, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The words cut into her like nothing else. She had always defined herself by the kill, by her ability to bring down anything in her path. It was all she knew. But the idea that she could be more than just a predator, that she could grow, was something she had never considered. Jason stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. You don't have to live a life of violence, Mratza. You don't have to be trapped in the cycle of killing. There's so much more to life than that. You can find it. You just have to be willing to look. The Huntress' hand trembled slightly. She had always seen herself as strong, as untouchable, but now, faced with this unexpected choice, she realized how fragile that certainty had been. She had built her entire existence on the idea that her strength came from being the apex predator. But what if that wasn't the truth? What if, instead of strength, she had been feeding an emptiness, a void that could never truly be filled by killing? I am not weak, Mratza snapped, more out of instinct than true conviction. I don't need your pity. Jason's face softened. I'm not pitying you. I'm offering you a chance to choose something more. You've already survived the hardest thing you'll ever face, your own doubts. I can see it in you. You're at a crossroads. What you choose now will define the rest of your life. You can keep running down this path or you can turn around and choose something else. But I promise you it won't be easy. Mratza's heart pounded in her chest, and for the first time she could feel the weight of her existence pressing down on her. The choices she had made, the lives she had taken, it was all part of the same cycle. She had killed for the Xyrix Empire, had hunted in the name of power. But what had it given her? Nothing but emptiness. She had spent so long pretending that she was invincible, that her strength was all that mattered. But deep down she knew she wasn't invincible. She knew that a life lived only for domination would eventually turn to dust. The thought of continuing down that path, of killing for the sake of power, felt hollow. But to break free from it? To choose something different? That was terrifying. Why me? She asked, her voice softer now, the edge of anger fading. Why not just kill me and be done with it? You could have ended this, but you didn't. You're still standing there offering me this. Why? Jason exhaled slowly, the weight of the moment settling in the space between them. Because I believe you're capable of more, Mratza. I believe that you can be better than what you've been taught to be. We all have our pasts, our scars, our mistakes. But we can choose to move past them. It's not about forgetting what's happened, but about using it to shape who we want to be. Mratza looked at him, her mind spinning with the enormity of what he was offering. Could she really change? Could she set aside the years of training, the instincts that had defined her, and walk away from everything she had ever known? The fear of doing so was suffocating. She didn't know who she would be without the hunt, without the chase, without the bloodshed. But another part of her, a part she hadn't acknowledged in so long, whispered a truth she couldn't ignore. Maybe it was time to let go. The choice was hers. The Huntress could continue down the path of destruction, reclaim her role as the predator, the hunter. Or she could choose something unknown, something that required vulnerability and courage. A chance to build, to grow, to connect. Mratza took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the moment settle on her like a heavy cloak. She looked at the human standing before her, offering peace in place of war, offering growth in place of destruction. And for the first time she asked herself one question. What kind of being did she want to be? And as the silence stretched on, she began to understand that the answer wasn't as simple as victory or defeat. It was something deeper. Something that would require her to make a choice she had never thought possible. The moment hung between them, thick with unspoken words, until the silence finally cracked under the weight of Mratza's thoughts. Her mind raced, the violent pulse of her past clashing with the fragile, unfamiliar pull of the future Jason offered. She had never been forced to confront her identity like this. Not with a human, and certainly not with someone who had no weapon, no defense, no armor. All he had was his voice, calm and steady, and a vision of a different kind of strength. Mratza swallowed hard, her throat tight, as the tension coiled inside her like a tightening spring. She wanted to lash out, to let the predator inside her claim victory, to slice through the soft words with a single stroke of her blade. But something she couldn't name, held her back. Maybe it was fear. Or maybe it was the beginning of a question that she was too terrified to face. What if there was more to life than domination? Jason's steady gaze was unwavering, waiting for her to make her decision. But he wasn't pressuring her. He wasn't rushing her. He simply stood there, offering a chance to step into the unknown. And it was the unknown that terrified Mratza the most. She glanced down at her blade, its gleaming edge catching the light of the alien moon above. For so long, it had been an extension of herself, her power, her weapon, her purpose. The weight of it in her hand had been familiar, comfortable. But now, it felt different, almost foreign, like it no longer belonged to the woman who stood holding it. "You don't understand," Mratza said, her voice strained as she met Jason's gaze again. "The Xyrix Empire, they depend on me. They've shaped me, trained me, turned me into this. I am a weapon. A tool. I don't know anything else. I was born to hunt." Jason's face softened, a trace of sorrow in his eyes. "I understand more than you think. I used to be like you, Mratza. I was a soldier, part of a system, fighting because it was what I was told to do. I thought it was my purpose too. But I realized something, that's not living. It's just surviving. And surviving isn't the same as living." She didn't speak for a long time. The words twisted inside her, like knots in her chest, but she couldn't untangle them. Living? What did that even mean? How could she even begin to understand that concept, when her entire life had been built on survival, on being stronger than the next, on asserting dominance over everything she encountered? "Then what?" she finally whispered, her voice barely audible as she looked away, her gaze lost in the endless expanse of the alien jungle. "What do I do now? How do I let go of everything I've been?" Jason stepped closer, his presence unwavering but not threatening. "You take one step at a time. You start by choosing who you want to be, not who others tell you to be. You don't have to leave everything behind in one moment, Mratza. Change takes time. But you have to want it." The sound of the wind in the trees and the distant calls of the creatures that lived in the jungle seemed to fade as Mratza processed his words. She was a weapon. A hunter. What else could she be? She had been made to kill, to fight, to dominate. There had never been another option. And yet, as Jason spoke, something inside her stirred, a whisper barely audible but insistent. "What if there's more? What if you're more?" Her grip on the blade loosened slightly, and she shifted uncomfortably, the weight of it suddenly feeling heavier, like a chain rather than a tool. For the first time in her life she considered putting it down. The idea was foreign, terrifying. She had never let go of her weapons, not once. But now, in the face of this human, in the face of a future that didn't require bloodshed, she wondered if there was something worth exploring. Jason noticed her hesitation. "You don't have to drop it right now. But you can choose. You can start thinking about what it means to be more than a weapon. You can choose to be something different. And when you're ready, you'll know what to do." Mratza's mind whirled. Could she be something else? Could she learn to live without the constant thrill of the hunt? The fear of that was almost suffocating. What would she be without her purpose, without the blood and the chase? What was she if not the apex predator? "Why would you want me to change?" she asked, her voice low. "I've killed your people. I've hunted your kind like animals. Why would you offer me this?" She gestured vaguely between them, her voice growing raw. "You should hate me. You should want me dead." Jason's expression softened, a quiet resolve in his eyes. "I'm not offering you forgiveness, Mratza. I'm offering you something better than that. I'm offering you a chance to grow, to be more than what you've been taught. It's not about what you've done, it's about what you can do now. You don't have to live with your past unless you choose to." The word struck her like a blow. She didn't have to live with her past. Could it really be that simple? Could she really let go of everything that had defined her for so long? "I don't know who I am without the hunt," Mratza confessed, her voice trembling with the weight of her vulnerability. "If I let go of this, who am I?" Jason's answer was soft but firm. "You're still you, Mratza. You're just someone who's beginning to understand there's more to you than the hunt. You're not defined by what you've done. You're defined by what you choose to do next." A long silence stretched between them, the jungle around them alive with the sounds of alien creatures. Mratza's hand trembled as she looked down at the blade in her palm, the weapon that had been her identity for so long. She thought of the lives she had taken, the battles she had fought, the blood that stained her past. Could she really turn away from all that? Could she become something more than the killer she had always been? The weight of the choice pressed on her chest like a physical thing, suffocating, overwhelming. It was so easy to continue down the path she had always known. The hunt, the kill, the thrill of power, it was comfortable. It was what she knew. But living, truly living, was something else entirely. It was the unknown. It was the future Jason was offering, and it was terrifying. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something she hadn't expected: hope. And in that moment, Mratza realized something. She didn't have to choose to be a monster. She could choose to be something else. She could choose a future where she wasn't defined by the blood she had spilled, but by the choices she made now. And for the first time in her life, Mratza took a deep breath, her grip loosening on the blade. She wasn't sure what came next. But she knew this: she had made the first step toward change. And that was something she had never thought possible. She had chosen. Mratza stood there, her hand still gripping the hilt of the vibroblade, but now the weight of it felt different. Less like an extension of herself and more like an object she had been carrying for far too long. The cool metallic surface of the weapon reflected the starlight, as though mocking her for the doubts she had never before allowed herself to entertain. She knew the path ahead wasn't going to be easy, and that uncertainty gripped her with every thought. But for the first time, the possibility of a new beginning didn't terrify her. It called to her, pulling at something deep inside. Jason's presence was a quiet anchor in the sea of her thoughts. He hadn't moved since she had let her grip loosen on the blade, his expression calm, but there was a trace of something deeper in his eyes, something she couldn't quite name, but it was there and it felt real. "You're not afraid?" she asked, her voice still a little raw, as though she wasn't sure if she could believe what was happening. "Not after everything I've done?" Jason gave her a small, reassuring smile, a smile that was at once understanding and kind. "Fear is natural, Mratza. But it doesn't have to control you. Your past doesn't define you unless you let it. The choice is always yours." Her breath caught in her throat as she processed his words. The past. For so long she had let her past shape her, let it mold her into something brutal, something fearsome. She had let the training, the expectations, and the bloodshed dictate who she was. But here, in this strange moment with Jason Clarke, she was seeing the possibility of being someone else. Someone better. Someone free. Free, she whispered almost to herself. The word felt alien on her tongue, but she couldn't deny the quiet longing it stirred within her. "Yes," Jason replied, his voice steady, like the calm after a storm. "You can be free, Mratza. Not from your past but from being enslaved by it. You've lived a life dictated by violence. Now you have the chance to live a life dictated by choice. You can be a part of something greater." He extended his hand, not as a gesture of domination, but as an offer, an invitation to step into a future she had never dreamed possible. It wasn't an easy thing to accept. The Huntress inside her was still there, the instinct screaming that she should run, that she should end this before she became vulnerable. But another part of her, the part that had listened to Jason's words, that had felt the stirring of something she could barely name, knew she couldn't turn back. Not now. Not when she had finally seen a glimpse of something better. With a tremor, Mratza let go of the vibroblade completely. It fell to the ground with a soft thunk, and the sound was like the shattering of an old life, one she had carried for far too long. The weight that lifted from her shoulders was almost physical. She felt lighter, as though something had been freed within her, something she hadn't realized had been trapped there for years. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, but filled with the weight of the choices they had made. She felt raw, exposed, but at the same time, there was a strange sense of peace settling over her, as though she had just crossed an invisible line. Mratza finally raised her eyes to meet Jason's, and for the first time she didn't see a human. She saw a companion, a fellow traveler on a journey of discovery, someone who had shown her that strength didn't have to be about domination. There was a kind of strength in vulnerability, in the willingness to change, to grow, to embrace something new. "I don't know what comes next," she said quietly, her voice still unsteady. "But I want to find out. I want to understand what it means to be more than what I've been." Jason nodded, his expression full of understanding and encouragement. "That's the first step, Mratza. The rest will follow, one step at a time. We'll figure it out together." She didn't say anything more. There were no words that could capture the flood of emotions racing through her. Hope, fear, relief, confusion. The future was still uncertain, and a part of her still feared the unknown. But the idea of building something, of living in a world where connection and compassion mattered more than the hunt, was now a part of her. She didn't have to live in the shadow of her past anymore. And that was a gift she had never thought possible. As the night wore on, the two of them, Human and Huntress, stood together in the quiet of the alien world, staring up at the stars. The vastness of the universe seemed so much smaller now, somehow more intimate. It wasn't just a place full of conflict and violence anymore. It was a place of possibility, a place where anyone could change, even someone like Mratza. She had spent so long running, so long being a weapon, that she had never stopped to think about what it meant to live. But now, as she stood beside Jason, she felt the stirrings of something new. The path ahead was not a path of destruction, but one of discovery, of who she could become if she dared to step beyond the limitations that had been forced upon her. Mratza looked over at Jason, her mind still swirling with possibilities, but one thing was clear: this was not the end. It was only the beginning. And as they turned together to face the future, the dawn of a new horizon spread before them, the first light breaking over the horizon of a world full of new beginnings. Humanity and all it represented had shown her a way forward. And now, for the first time, Mratza was ready to take the next step, whatever it may be. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more exciting HFY stories. Your support means the world to us. And make sure to tap the bell icon so you never miss an update. Stay tuned for our next adventure, and until then, keep exploring the stars. See you in the next video.